The wagon wheel cracked clean through on a rock she never saw coming, and Hannah Harlow knew with sickening certainty that her carefully constructed plan to start fresh in California had just shattered along with it. She stood in the middle of the dusty trail, staring at the useless wheel tilted at an impossible angle, her father's old mare snorting nervously in the traces, and felt the weight of every choice that had brought her to this moment pressing down on her shoulders like stones. It was late September 1878, and the afternoon sun beat down on the California foothills with relentless intensity. Hannah had been traveling alone for 3 weeks now, ever since leaving Sacramento with barely enough money for supplies and a burning determination to prove she could make it on her own. The job waiting for her in Angel's Camp, a position as a schoolteacher, represented everything she had worked for, the chance to build a life far from the shame that had driven her from her hometown. But that position required her to arrive by the 1st of October, which was now only 4 days away, and here she stood with a broken wagon and pride that tasted like ash in her mouth. She walked around the wagon, her worn boots kicking up dust that settled on her already filthy skirts. The supplies she had so carefully rationed were still intact. The trunk containing her few possessions remained secure, but none of that mattered if she could not move forward. The nearest town was Angel's Camp itself, still a good 15 miles ahead according to the last marker she had passed. Behind her, Sacramento might as well have been on the other side of the world. Hannah untied her bonnet and wiped the sweat from her forehead, her auburn hair sticking to her neck in damp tendrils. She had passed a ranch about 2 miles back, smoke rising from its chimney in the distance. Every rational thought in her head told her to walk back there and ask for help. But the thought of approaching strangers, of admitting she could not handle this journey alone, of seeing the questions in their eyes about why a young woman was traveling without family or escort, made her stomach twist with anxiety. She had spent the last year in Sacramento working as a seamstress, saving every penny and dodging questions about her past. The teaching position in Angel's Camp had seemed like a gift from God himself when she saw the advertisement. A small mining town desperate enough for education that they would hire a woman with references she had carefully cultivated, and a story she had practiced until it sounded like truth. No one in Angel's Camp knew about Thomas Garrett, about the engagement that had ended in public humiliation when his wealthy family had deemed her beneath their notice, about the rumors that had followed her like shadows through the streets of her hometown in Missouri. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western hills, and Hannah knew she had perhaps 3 hours of good daylight left. She could try to fix the wheel herself, though she had no idea how to even begin such a task. She could unhitch the mare and ride bareback to Angel's Camp, abandoning the wagon and everything in it, arriving at her new position with nothing but the clothes on her back. Or she could swallow her pride, walk back to that ranch and ask for help. Pride had been her constant companion since the day Thomas had called off their engagement in front of half the town, his mother standing beside him with a smile of cold satisfaction. Pride had gotten her through the whispers and the pitying looks. Pride had given her the strength to leave Missouri and start over. But pride could not fix a broken wagon wheel. Hannah was still standing there, frozen by indecision, when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from the direction she had been heading. She turned to see a rider coming up the trail, sitting easy in the saddle on a large roan gelding. As he drew closer, she could make out more details. A man in his late 20s, perhaps, wearing a battered hat and dusty work clothes, a red bandana tied around his neck. He had the weathered look of someone who spent his days under the sun, and he rode with the casual confidence of a man completely at home in the saddle. The rider slowed as he approached, and Hannah felt her spine straighten automatically, her chin lifting in a gesture of defiance against the vulnerability of her situation. She watched as he took in the scene with a quick, assessing glance. The broken wheel, the nervous horse, the lone woman standing in the middle of nowhere. He touched the brim of his hat in greeting, his eyes a startling shade of blue-green in his tanned face. "Looks like you have got some trouble there, miss." "I have it under control," Hannah heard herself say, the lie automatic. "Thank you for your concern." He dismounted with fluid grace, looping his reins over his saddle horn. His horse stood obediently as he walked closer to examine the wagon wheel. Hannah noticed he moved carefully, keeping enough distance that she would not feel threatened, but close enough to see the extent of the damage. "That wheel is not just broken," he said after a moment, his voice carrying a hint of a drawl that spoke of Texas or maybe Oklahoma. "The axle is cracked too. You are not fixing that without proper tools and a good amount of time." "Then I will make the time," Hannah said stiffly. "I appreciate your observation, but I can manage." He straightened and looked at her directly, and there was something in his gaze that made her uncomfortable, not because it was improper, but because it was too knowing, too perceptive. "How far are you trying to go?" "Angel's Camp." "I have business there." "That is a long walk carrying whatever you need from that wagon, and it will be dark in a few hours." He gestured back the way he had come. "I work at the Quinn Ranch about a mile and a half up ahead. My employer would be happy to offer you shelter for the night, and I can get your wagon fixed properly tomorrow. We can have you in Angel's Camp by tomorrow afternoon at the latest." "I told you, I can manage on my own." The words came out sharper than she intended, born of exhaustion and fear, and the desperate need to maintain the illusion of control. The cowboy was quiet for a moment, studying her with those disconcerting eyes. Then he said, very gently, "Pride will not keep you warm tonight." The words hit her like a physical blow, stripping away all her careful defenses. Hannah felt her face flame with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "You know nothing about me or my circumstances. I know you are alone on a trail with a broken wagon, and the temperature drops cold in these hills come nightfall. I know there are wild animals and worse that travel after dark, and I know you are scared to ask for help, though I cannot say why." He held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I am not trying to insult you, miss. I am just offering basic Christian charity to someone who needs it." "I do not need anything from anyone," Hannah said, but her voice wavered slightly, betraying her. "Maybe not. But your horse does, and that wagon does, and I am guessing whatever is in that trunk matters enough to you that you do not want to leave it behind." He took a step back toward his mount. "My name is Vincent Quinn. My family owns the ranch I mentioned. My mother is there, my 2 younger sisters, and my father when he is not out checking the cattle. You would be safe and properly chaperoned, and come morning, we can get you back on your way. No strings, no judgment, just neighbors helping neighbors." Hannah wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at her to send him away, to figure this out herself, to maintain the wall of independence she had built so carefully. But the sun was sinking lower, and her arms ached from trying to shift the wagon earlier, and she was so tired of being alone with her fear and her shame. "I am expected in Angel's Camp," she said quietly. "I have a position waiting. I cannot afford to lose it by arriving late. Then let me help you get there on time." Vincent's voice was patient, kind even, without a trace of the pity she had learned to dread. "It is just practical sense." She looked at him, really looked at him, trying to read his intentions. He had a strong face, not handsome in the classical sense, but honest-looking, with small lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. His clothes were worn but clean, mended in places with neat stitches that spoke of careful maintenance. His hands, resting loosely at his sides, were calloused and scarred from work, the hands of a man who knew how to fix things. "I do not even know you," she said, but it was not quite a refusal anymore. "That is fair enough. We can ride to the ranch and you can meet my family before you decide to stay. If you do not feel comfortable, I will bring you into Angel's camp tonight, wagon or no wagon. But I promise you, miss." He paused, waiting for her to supply her name. "Harlow. Hannah Harlow. Miss Harlow, I promise you that my family will treat you with nothing but respect. My word on it." Hannah closed her eyes briefly, fighting the internal battle between her pride and her growing desperation. When she opened them again, Vincent was still standing there, patient and unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world to wait for her decision. "All right," she said finally, the words feeling like both a surrender and a relief. "I accept your offer, thank you." Vincent nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "You are making the smart choice. Let me help you get what you need from the wagon, and we can ride double to the ranch. I will come back for the wagon tomorrow with my brother and proper equipment." He moved to help her untie her trunk from the wagon bed, and Hannah found herself noticing small details. The way he handled her possessions carefully, the quiet competence of his movements, the fact that he did not press her with questions or make awkward small talk. When she had gathered what she needed, including a carpet bag with her most essential items, he secured everything behind his saddle with practiced efficiency. "Have you ridden before?" he asked as he prepared to mount. "Yes, though not often recently." Hannah had learned to ride as a girl, but it had been years since she had done more than sit sedately on a well-trained horse at a walking pace. Vincent swung into the saddle and then extended his hand down to her. "I will pull you up behind me. Hold on around my waist, and do not worry about the horse. He is steady." Hannah hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. His grip was strong and sure as he lifted her up behind him with surprising ease. She settled herself as modestly as possible, acutely aware of how close she was to this stranger, how she had no choice but to wrap her arms around his waist to keep her seat. "Ready?" he asked over his shoulder. "Ready," she confirmed, though her heart was pounding. Vincent urged the horse forward at an easy walk, mindful of his double burden. They left Hannah's wagon behind on the trail, a monument to her failed attempt at complete self-sufficiency, and headed up the road toward the Quinn Ranch. The ride gave Hannah too much time to think, to second-guess her decision, to worry about what awaited her. But it also gave her time to notice the landscape, the way the golden hills rolled away into the distance, dotted with oak trees and exposed granite. The air smelled of dry grass and dust, and something sweet she could not identify. In the distance, she could hear the faint sound of water, probably a creek somewhere in the valley below. "How long have you lived here?" she asked, mostly to break the silence. "All my life. My parents came out during the gold rush in '49, though my father was never much for mining. He saw more future in raising cattle for the miners. Built the ranch from nothing." There was pride in Vincent's voice, but it was the comfortable pride of stating a fact, not boasting. "I was born in the old cabin that same year. We have got a proper house now, built it about 10 years back. And you have 2 sisters, 3 actually. Marie is the oldest. She is married and lives in town with her husband. Then there is Catherine, she is 21, and Louise, who just turned 18. They keep things lively." His tone was affectionate. "What about you? You have got family back wherever you came from." Hannah stiffened slightly. "I would rather not discuss my personal circumstances if you do not mind." Fair enough, Vincent said easily, not pressing the issue. Though I should warn you, my mother is going to ask questions. She cannot help herself. You do not have to answer anything you do not want to, but she will ask. I have a prepared story, Hannah said, then immediately regretted revealing that much. Vincent was quiet for a moment before he spoke again. Running from something then, or someone. I did not say that. You did not have to. His voice was gentle. I have seen that look before. My sister Marie came home one time with that same expression. Turned out the man she had been courting was not the gentleman he pretended to be. Took her a while to trust again. I am not your sister and my situation is different, Hannah said firmly. I am sure it is. Like I said, you do not owe me your story. Just wanted you to know you are not the first person to need a fresh start, and there is no shame in it. But there was shame in it, Hannah thought. There was shame in being foolish enough to believe Thomas's promises, in not seeing through his family's false warmth until it was too late, in becoming the subject of gossip and speculation. There was shame in running away instead of holding her head high, even though staying would have been unbearable. She did not respond to Vincent's comment, and he seemed content to let the silence settle between them again. After another 10 minutes, they crested a small rise, and Hannah saw the Quinn ranch spread out in the shallow valley below. It was bigger than she had expected, more prosperous looking. The main house was a solid 2-story structure with a wide porch wrapping around the front. There were several outbuildings, a large barn, what looked like a bunkhouse, various sheds and corrals. Cattle dotted the hillsides, and she could see several horses in a paddock near the barn. Smoke rose from the house's chimney, and even from a distance, the place had an air of permanence and stability that made something in Hannah's chest ache with unexpected longing. Home, Vincent said simply, and guided his horse down the slope toward the ranch. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes to watch their arrival. She was in her late 40s, Hannah guessed, wearing a simple calico dress and an apron, her dark hair streaked with gray and pulled back in a practical bun. Even from a distance, Hannah could see the resemblance to Vincent in the set of her shoulders and the way she stood. Vincent dismounted first, then helped Hannah down with the same careful courtesy he had shown before. The woman approached, her expression curious but welcoming. "Vincent, who is this?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of an accent that Hannah thought might be Irish. "Mother, this is Miss Hannah Harlow. I found her on the road with a broken wagon. She is heading to Angel's Camp, and I offered our hospitality for the night so I can fix her wagon properly tomorrow." Vincent made the introduction smoothly, his manner respectful but matter-of-fact. Of course, of course." The woman turned to Hannah with a warm smile. "I am Margaret Quinn." "You are very welcome in our home, Miss Harlow. You must be exhausted from your journey." "I do not want to impose," Hannah started, but Margaret waved off her protest. "It is no imposition at all. We do not get much company out here, and it is always nice to have another woman to talk to. Come inside and I will get you something to eat and drink." She glanced at her son. "Vincent, bring Miss Harlow's things to the spare room." "Yes, madam." Vincent began untying Hannah's belongings from his saddle, and Margaret gently took Hannah's arm, guiding her toward the house. The interior was as welcoming as the exterior had suggested. The main room was large and comfortable, with furniture that looked handmade but well-crafted, braided rugs on the wooden floor, and curtains at the windows that let in the golden afternoon light. It was clean but lived in, the kind of home that spoke of a family that worked hard but also knew how to make a space warm and inviting. Two young women looked up from where they sat near the fireplace as Hannah and Margaret entered. One was working on mending some clothes, the other appeared to be reading. "Girls, this is Miss Hannah Harlow. She will be staying with us tonight. Miss Harlow, "These are my daughters, Catherine and Louise." Catherine, the older of the two, stood and offered a friendly smile. She had her brother's eyes and her mother's dark hair. "Welcome, Miss Harlow. It is nice to meet you." Louise, a pretty girl with lighter brown hair and freckles across her nose, practically bounced out of her chair with enthusiasm. "Oh, how exciting! We so rarely have guests." "Are you traveling alone? Where are you from? Vincent said you are going to Angel's Camp." "Louise, let the poor woman catch her breath before you pepper her with questions," Margaret scolded gently. She guided Hannah to a comfortable chair. "Please sit down. Would you like some coffee or water?" "Water would be wonderful, thank you." Hannah sank into the chair, suddenly aware of how tired she was. The adrenaline that had been keeping her going since the wagon wheel broke was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Vincent came in carrying her trunk and carpetbag. "I will take these upstairs," he said, heading for the staircase without waiting for a response. Margaret disappeared into what Hannah assumed was the kitchen, and Catherine resumed her seat, picking up her mending. "You will have to forgive Louise. She gets excited when anything different happens." "Life on a ranch can be a bit monotonous." "I do not find it monotonous," Louise protested. "But it is nice to have someone new to talk to. Do you really have a position waiting for you in Angel's Camp?" "Yes, at the school. I am meant to begin next week." Hannah accepted the glass of water Margaret brought her and drank gratefully. "A teacher?" Catherine looked impressed. "That must have required a lot of education." "I attended normal school in Missouri for 2 years," Hannah said, sticking to the outline of her prepared story. "I wanted to come west for new opportunities. Missouri, that is a long way to travel." Margaret sat down across from Hannah, her expression kind but inquisitive. "Did you come alone?" "I traveled with a wagon train to Sacramento, then continued on my own from there." That much was true. Hannah had joined a group of families heading west, keeping to herself and avoiding questions. When they had reached Sacramento, she had struck out alone rather than face more scrutiny. "That is very brave," Louise said admiringly. "I do not think I could travel all that way by myself." "Or very foolish, depending on your perspective," Hannah said with more honesty than she had intended. "The broken wagon wheel would suggest the latter." "It was not foolish," Vincent said, coming back down the stairs. "Everyone needs help sometimes. That does not make them foolish." Hannah looked up at him, surprised by the quiet certainty in his voice. He met her eyes for a moment, and she saw understanding there, and something else she could not quite identify. "Vincent is right," Margaret agreed. "You were resourceful and determined enough to make it this far. That counts for something. Now you must be hungry. Let me fix you a proper meal." "Please, you do not need to go to any trouble," Hannah protested, but Margaret was already heading back toward the kitchen. "It is no trouble at all. Catherine, come help me." "Louise, why do not you show Miss Harlow where she can wash up?" The next hour passed in a blur of domesticity that was both foreign and strangely comforting to Hannah. She washed the dust from her face and hands in the small upstairs bedroom that was to be hers for the night. A cozy space with a real bed and a window that looked out over the hills. Louise chattered cheerfully while showing her around, asking questions that Hannah deflected as gracefully as she could manage. When they all sat down to dinner, Hannah found herself at a table with the Quinn family, including Thomas Quinn, Vincent's father, who had returned from checking fence lines just before the meal. He was a big man in his 50s, with graying red hair and a beard, and a booming laugh that seemed to fill the room. He welcomed Hannah with the same easy hospitality his wife had shown, asking no difficult questions and simply accepting her presence as natural. The food was simple but good. Beef stew with fresh bread, vegetables from their garden, and apple pie for dessert. The conversation flowed around her, the family discussing the day's work, plans for the coming week, news from town. They included Hannah when appropriate, but did not press her to participate, and she found herself gradually relaxing in spite of her reservations. She watched Vincent during the meal, noticing the way he interacted with his family. He was clearly respected, his opinion sought on various ranch matters, but he also had an easy humor with his sisters, teasing them gently and accepting their teasing in return. He was patient with his mother's fussing and attentive to his father's stories. There was a fundamental decency about him that Hannah found herself responding to, even as she reminded herself not to trust too easily. After dinner, Margaret insisted that Hannah rest while the girls cleaned up. Vincent excused himself to see to the horses, and Thomas returned to some paperwork in what appeared to be a small office off the main room. Hannah found herself alone on the porch, watching the sun complete its descent behind the western hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and purple. She heard the door open behind her and turned to see Vincent approaching. He had changed his dusty work shirt for a cleaner one, though he still wore the same worn trousers and boots. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "It is your porch," Hannah pointed out. "That is not really an answer, but I will take it as permission." He leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the darkening landscape. "Beautiful evening." "Yes." Hannah wrapped her arms around herself as the temperature began to drop. "Your family has been very kind. They are good people. Sometimes I think too good for this rough country, but they have made a real home here." He glanced at her. "You did not have to accept our help. What changed your mind?" Hannah considered lying, then found she did not have the energy for it. "Fear, I suppose. And the realization that my pride was not going to fix a wagon wheel." "That is honest." Vincent's tone was approving. "For what it is worth, I think it takes more courage to ask for help than to struggle alone and fail. You seem very confident about a lot of things." "Not confident. Just observant. I have seen a lot of people come through this territory over the years. Gold seekers, settlers, people running from something, people running toward something else. You learn to read folks pretty well when you are paying attention." He pushed away from the railing. "I am going to head back out to your wagon first thing in the morning, probably around dawn. Should have it fixed and ready to move by mid-morning. We can have you in Angel's Camp well before dark tomorrow." "Thank you. I truly do appreciate your help, even if I was ungracious about accepting it." "You were not ungracious. You were scared, and that is different." He touched the brim of his hat in that same polite gesture from earlier. "Get some rest, Miss Harlow. Tomorrow will be easier." He left her there on the porch, and Hannah stood for a long time watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. For the first time in months, she felt something other than the constant anxiety that had become her companion. It was not exactly hope, not yet, but it was at least the absence of immediate fear. She slept that night in the comfortable bed, in the quiet house, and if she dreamed of broken engagements and pitying whispers, she also dreamed of steady blue-green eyes and a voice saying that pride would not keep her warm. True to his word, Vincent was gone before Hannah woke the next morning. Margaret explained over breakfast that he and his father had ridden out at first light with the tools needed to repair the wagon, and they expected to be back by mid-morning. "Vincent is very good with his hands," Margaret said as she poured Hannah more coffee. "He built most of the furniture in this house himself. If the wagon can be fixed, he will manage it." Hannah spent the morning helping Catherine and Louise with various household chores, insisting that she should contribute something in exchange for their hospitality. They worked on mending clothes together, and Hannah found herself almost enjoying the simple domesticity of it, the easy conversation with the two sisters who seemed genuinely interested in her plans to teach. "I always wanted to be a teacher," Catherine confided. "But there was no normal school close enough, and my parents needed me here on the ranch. Sometimes I wonder what my life might have been like if I had pursued it." "It is not too late," Hannah said. "You are only 21. "Out here, that is practically an old maid," Catherine said with a rueful smile. "Though I am not sure I mind. I have seen what marriage can be like, and I would rather wait for something real than settle for something convenient." Louise made a face. "Catherine has very high standards. She turned down 3 proposals already. Because none of them were proposing to me. They were proposing to father's ranch and mother's cooking skills," Catherine retorted. "I want someone who actually sees me as a person, not as a means to an end." Hannah felt a sharp pang of recognition. Thomas had proposed to her so beautifully, with such apparent sincerity, that she had never questioned whether he truly loved her, until his mother had made it clear that Hannah was an unacceptable choice. Looking back, she could see all the signs she had missed, the way he had kept their engagement quiet, the way he had never invited her to meet his friends, the way he had always made her feel slightly less than, even while declaring his devotion. "I think that is wise," she said quietly. "Better to wait than to tie yourself to someone who does not truly value you." Catherine gave her a knowing look. "That sounds like the voice of experience." Hannah looked down at her mending. "Perhaps. Whoever he was a fool," Louise declared with the certainty of youth. "Anyone who would let you go clearly did not deserve you." "Louise, that is presumptuous," Catherine scolded, but her eyes were sympathetic when she looked at Hannah. "It is all right," Hannah said. "And yes, I was engaged once. It ended badly. That is why I came west, to start fresh where no one knows my story." "Well, your secret is safe with us," Catherine assured her. "And for what it is worth, Angel's Camp is a good place for a fresh start. The people there are mostly decent, and they are desperate enough for a teacher that they will not care about your past. I hope you are right." Hannah finished the seam she was working on and set the garment aside. "I need this position. I have very little money left and no other prospects." "Then we will make sure you get there in time," Margaret said from the doorway, startling all 3 women. None of them had noticed her approach. "And if you ever need anything, you know where to find us. Sometimes it helps to have friends, even if you do not think you need them." Hannah felt an unexpected tightness in her throat. "Thank you, all of you. You have been kinder to me than I deserve." "Nonsense. You deserve kindness just as much as anyone else." Margaret moved to look out the window. "I think I hear the wagon coming now." They all moved to the window and watched as Vincent and Thomas came into view, leading Hannah's mare, who was hitched to the now repaired wagon. Vincent was riding his horse alongside, and he caught sight of them in the window and raised a hand in greeting. Hannah hurried outside, the other women following. Vincent dismounted and walked over to meet her. "All fixed," he announced. "The wheel is solid now and we reinforced the axle. It should get you to Angel's Camp without any trouble." Hannah walked around the wagon, examining the repair. The work was clean and professional, far better than anything she could have managed on her own. "This is excellent work. What do I owe you for your time and materials?" Vincent exchanged a glance with his father. "Call it a neighborly favor. No charge." "I cannot accept that," Hannah protested. "You spent hours on this, and the materials alone must have cost something." "Miss Harlow, if you try to insist on paying us, my wife will be very offended," Thomas said with a grin. "We help our neighbors out here. That is how we survive. You just pass the kindness along when you are settled and someone else needs help." Hannah looked between the 2 men, feeling that familiar struggle between pride and gratitude. But this time, gratitude won out more easily. "Then I thank you both, most sincerely. I will not forget this kindness." That is settled then. Vincent began checking over the wagon more thoroughly, making sure everything was secure. If you are ready, I will ride with you into Angel's camp, just to make sure you get there safely. That is not necessary, Hannah started to say, but Margaret cut her off. It absolutely is necessary. A woman traveling alone is one thing, but we would feel better knowing you arrived safely. Vincent does not mind, do you, son? Not at all. Vincent finished his inspection and looked at Hannah. Besides, I need to pick up some supplies in town anyway. This just gives me an excuse to go today instead of next week. Hannah could see she was not going to win this argument, and truthfully, she was relieved to have company for the final leg of her journey. Very well, thank you. Margaret packed them food for the journey, insisting Hannah take far more than she could eat in one day. Catherine and Louise both hugged her goodbye, making her promise to visit if she ever came back through the area. Thomas shook her hand with a warm smile and wished her well in her new position. Finally, Hannah climbed onto the wagon seat, took up the reins, and looked down at the family gathered to see her off. I do not know how to properly thank you for everything, she said, her voice catching slightly. You have given me more than shelter and help with the wagon. You have given me hope that there are still good people in the world. You just be one of those good people yourself, Margaret said. That is thanks enough. Vincent mounted his horse, and with a final round of waves and goodbyes, they set off down the road toward Angel's camp. The morning was clear and bright, the air already warming as the sun climbed higher. Hannah's mare moved easily in the traces, and the repaired wagon rolled smoothly along the rutted road. For a while, they traveled in companionable silence. Hannah found herself stealing glances at Vincent, this man who had helped her without asking for anything in return, who had seen her pride and fear, and called it out without judgment. He rode with that same easy grace she had noticed before, completely at home on horseback, his eyes scanning the landscape with the practiced attention of someone who knew this country intimately. Can I ask you something? Hannah said finally, breaking the silence. Of course. Why did you stop to help me yesterday? You could have ridden past, assumed I would figure something out on my own. Most people would have. Vincent considered the question for a moment before answering. A few years back, my sister Marie was traveling back from town when her horse threw a shoe. She was stranded about 5 miles from home, getting dark, and she was scared. A family passing by stopped to help, gave her a ride home, would not accept any payment. They said someone had helped them once when they needed it, and they were just returning the favor. He looked over at Hannah. That stuck with me. We are all just trying to get by in this world. Sometimes the difference between making it and not making it is whether someone stops to help. What happened to your sister? You mentioned someone who was not a gentleman. That was a different situation, a couple years later. Fellow named Marcus Roth, from a family in San Francisco. He came through Angel's camp supposedly looking for investment opportunities, met Marie at a church social. He was charming, educated, knew how to say all the right things, courted her properly, or so it seemed. Asked father for permission to marry her, but something went wrong. Marie found out he already had a wife back in San Francisco. He was just looking for a convenient arrangement while he was doing business in the area. When she confronted him, he did not even have the decency to be ashamed. Just laughed it off and moved on to the next town. Vincent's jaw tightened at the memory. It hurt her badly, not just the betrayal but the fact that she had believed him so completely. Took her a long time to trust anyone after that. But she did eventually. You said she is married now. Yes, to a good man named Daniel Foster. He is a doctor in Angel's camp, been there about 6 years. He was patient with her, did not push, let her come to trust him in her own time. They have been married 3 years now and they are very happy. Vincent smiled. Daniel is the kind of man who proves that there are still decent people in the world. Hannah was quiet, absorbing this story. I am glad she found someone worthy of her. What about you? The man you were engaged to, what happened? Hannah had not intended to tell him, had planned to keep that part of her past locked away. But something about the easy rhythm of the wagon wheels, the privacy of the open road, and the genuine interest in Vincent's question loosened her tongue. His name was Thomas Garrett. His family owned the largest mercantile in my hometown, and they were considered the finest people in the county. I was working as a seamstress in a dress shop when we met. He started courting me, and I thought. She paused, swallowing against the tightness in her throat. I thought he loved me. He said all the right things, made all the right promises. When he proposed, I believed we would have a future together. But his family did not approve. That is putting it mildly, his mother especially. She made it very clear that I was unsuitable, that my family was beneath theirs, that I would be an embarrassment to them in society. And Thomas, when it came down to it, he chose his family and their money over me. Hannah stared straight ahead, not wanting to see pity in Vincent's face. He called off the engagement at a party in front of half the town. His mother stood beside him, looking so satisfied. The humiliation it was unbearable. I am sorry that happened to you. The worst part was not even the public humiliation. It was realizing that I had been so blind, that I had seen what I wanted to see instead of what was really there. All the signs were there that he did not really value me, and I ignored them all. That does not make you foolish. It makes you human. We all want to believe the best of people we care about. Perhaps. But I cannot afford to be that trusting again. I came west to build a life where I am valued for what I can do, not for my family connections or lack thereof. I want to be independent, to rely on no one but myself. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. Independence is a fine thing to want, but I think you might be confusing independence with isolation. One makes you strong. The other just makes you lonely. Hannah turned to look at him, startled by the insight. You seem very wise for a cowboy. He laughed at that, a genuine sound of amusement. Cowboys have to think too, you know. We spend a lot of time alone with our thoughts while herding cattle or mending fences. Gives a man time to figure things out. He met her eyes. You can be independent and still accept help when you need it. The two are not mutually exclusive. Tell me about Angel's Camp, Hannah said, deliberately changing the subject. What is the town like? Vincent seemed to understand her need to move away from personal topics. It is a mining town, though the gold has mostly played out now. Maybe 300 people living there, maybe a few more. It has got everything you need. General store, hotel, saloon, church, doctor's office, which is where my sister and her husband live. The school is a small building near the church. It has been without a proper teacher for about 6 months, since old Mrs. Henderson passed away. The children have been getting lessons here and there from whoever has time, but nothing consistent. So they will be eager for structure. They will be eager for anything at this point. Some of the older kids have gotten a bit wild without regular schooling, but most of the parents are decent folks who want their children to have an education. You will have your work cut out for you, but I think you will do well. I hope so. I cannot afford to fail at this. You will not fail. You are too determined for that. Vincent pointed ahead. We are getting close now. You can see the smoke from the town just over that next rise. Hannah's stomach tightened with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. This was it, the fresh start she had been working toward for months. Everything depended on making a good impression, on convincing the town council that she was the right person for the position. They crested the rise, and Angel's Camp spread out before them in a valley below. It was bigger than Hannah had expected, with a main street lined with buildings and houses scattered on the hillsides. She could see the church steeple rising above the other structures, and what must be the mine works on the far side of town. "It is lovely," she said, and meant it. "It is home," Vincent agreed. "Come on, I will take you to meet Reverend Thompson first. He is the head of the school committee." They made their way down into town, and Hannah was acutely aware of the curious glances they attracted. A woman driving a wagon with a cowboy escort was apparently noteworthy enough to draw attention. She kept her head high and her expression calm, determined not to show any of the nervousness she felt. Vincent led her to a neat white church at the edge of the main street. A man was working in the small garden beside the building, and he looked up at their approach. He was in his 50s, with gray hair and a kind face, wearing simple clothing and a broad-brimmed hat. "Vincent Quinn, good to see you," the man called out, setting down his gardening tools and walking over to meet them. "What brings you to town today, Reverend Thompson? I would like to introduce Miss Hannah Harlow. She is the new school teacher you have been expecting." The Reverend's face lit up with pleasure. "Miss Harlow, what a relief to see you. We were starting to worry when you did not arrive yesterday as we expected. I am Reverend Samuel Thompson, and I speak for the whole community when I say how glad we are that you are here." Hannah climbed down from the wagon, and the Reverend shook her hand warmly. "I apologize for the delay. I had some trouble on the road, but Mr. Quinn was kind enough to help me get the wagon repaired." "The Quinn family are good people," Reverend Thompson agreed. "We are fortunate to have them in our community." He looked Hannah over with frank assessment, but his expression remained friendly. "You look tired from your journey. Why do not we get you settled in your lodgings first, and then we can discuss your duties at the school? We have arranged for you to stay in a small house behind the church. It is not much, but it is clean and private." "That sounds perfect, thank you." Vincent helped unload Hannah's trunk and belongings, carrying them to the small cottage the Reverend indicated. It was indeed modest, just 2 rooms with basic furniture, but it was clean and had a small stove for cooking. The back window looked out over the hills, and Hannah could see wildflowers growing in the grass. "This will do very nicely," she said, looking around with growing relief. She had been worried about what kind of accommodation they might have arranged. "The town provides a small salary, plus use of this house and credit at the general store for basic supplies," Reverend Thompson explained. "It is not much, but we do our best to take care of our teacher." "I am grateful for all of it." Hannah turned to Vincent, who was standing by the door. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Quinn. I truly could not have made it here without your help." "I am glad I could help." Vincent touched his hat brim in that familiar gesture. "If you ever need anything, the ranch is not far. Just send word." "I will remember that." There was a moment of awkward silence, and Hannah realized she did not want him to leave. This man who had appeared when she needed help most, who had seen past her pride and offered kindness without judgment, had become something like a lifeline in the past day and a half. "Perhaps you could visit sometime," she heard herself say, "when you are in town." "I would like to thank you properly once I am settled." Vincent's face brightened. "I would like that. I come to town about once a week for supplies and to visit Marie and Daniel. I will stop by and see how you are doing." "I would appreciate that." Reverend Thompson cleared his throat gently. "I hate to interrupt, but Miss Harlow, if you are not too tired, I would like to show you the schoolhouse and introduce you to a few of the parents who are eager to meet you." "Of course." Hannah reluctantly turned her attention back to the Reverend. Vincent took his cue. "I will let you get settled then. Welcome to Angel's Camp, Miss Harlow." "Goodbye, Mr. Quinn, and thank you again." She watched him leave, mounting his horse and heading down the street toward what must be the general store. Then she turned back to find Reverend Thompson watching her with an amused expression. "Vincent Quinn is a fine young man," he said. "Steady, reliable, and from a good family." "He was very helpful," Hannah said carefully, not wanting to encourage speculation. "I am sure he was." The Reverend's tone was mild but knowing. "Well then, shall we go look at the school?" The rest of the day passed in a blur of introductions and information. The schoolhouse was small but adequate, with desks for about 20 students, a blackboard, and basic supplies. Reverend Thompson introduced her to several members of the school committee and a few of the parents, all of whom seemed relieved and pleased to have a real teacher finally in place. Hannah learned that she would have students ranging from age 6 to 14, with varying levels of education. Some had learned basic reading and writing, others were nearly illiterate. It would be challenging work, but Hannah found herself looking forward to it. This was something she could do, something that did not depend on family connections or social standing. By evening, she was alone in her small cottage, exhausted but satisfied. She had a job, a home, and a fresh start. It was everything she had been working toward. She should have been completely content. But as she prepared a simple supper and settled in for the night, she found her thoughts drifting back to Vincent Quinn, to his steady presence and his kind eyes, and the way he had seen through her defenses without making her feel exposed or vulnerable, to his words about the difference between independence and isolation. She reminded herself firmly that she was here to build a new life, not to fall into the same trap of depending on others. She had learned her lesson with Thomas. She could not afford to trust too easily or to mistake kindness for something more. But even as she told herself this, she could not quite shake the warmth that had filled her chest when Vincent had said he would visit. And when she finally fell asleep that night, she dreamed not of humiliation and shame, but of blue-green eyes and a voice promising that she was not alone. The next week passed quickly as Hannah threw herself into her new position. She spent the first day cleaning and organizing the schoolhouse, making an inventory of supplies and books. The second day, she met with parents and began assessing each student's current level of education. By the third day, she had established a routine and a curriculum, dividing the children into 3 groups based on their abilities. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying. Hannah discovered that she loved teaching, loved seeing the moment when a concept clicked in a child's mind, loved the eager questions and the gradual building of knowledge. Some of the older boys tested her authority at first, but she handled them with a firm hand and fair discipline, and they soon fell into line. The town accepted her with surprising ease. She had been worried about questions about her past, but the people of Angel's Camp seemed more interested in her qualifications and her dedication to their children than in where she came from or why. She attended church on Sunday and was welcomed warmly by the congregation. She shopped at the general store and exchanged pleasantries with her neighbors. Slowly, carefully, she began to build a life, but through it all she found herself watching for Vincent. She told herself it was simply gratitude, that she just wanted to properly thank him for his help. But she could not deny the small leap her heart gave every time she saw a rider approaching, or the disappointment when it turned out to be someone else. It was late on Saturday afternoon, 8 days after her arrival in Angel's Camp, when Vincent finally appeared. Hannah was in the schoolhouse preparing lessons for the following week when she heard a knock on the open door. She looked up to see him standing in the doorway, hat in hand. "Mr. Quinn," she said, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. "What a nice surprise." "I said I would stop by," he reminded her, stepping inside and looking around the schoolroom with interest. "This is a nice setup you have got here. It is adequate. The children are doing well, most of them." Hannah set down her chalk and dusted off her hands. I have been meaning to find time to visit the ranch and thank your family properly, but I have been so busy getting established. They understand. Starting a new position is demanding work. He walked over to examine the books on her shelf. My sisters asked me to invite you to Sunday dinner tomorrow if you are free. They would love to see you again. I would enjoy that very much. Hannah realized she meant it. The past week had been productive but also lonely. She had acquaintances in town but no real friends yet, and the thought of spending time with the Quinn family was genuinely appealing. Good. I will come by after church to get you if that works. It is too far to walk, and I would not want you making the trip alone. You do not need to go out of your way. It is not out of my way. Besides, it gives me an excuse to come to town twice in one weekend. He smiled at her, and Hannah felt that familiar warmth spreading through her chest. In that case, I accept gratefully. They stood there for a moment, smiling at each other, and Hannah was acutely aware of how her pulse had quickened, how conscious she was of his presence in the small room. She cleared her throat and looked away, unsettled by her reaction. Would you like to see how the wagon is holding up? She asked, needing to break the tension. It has performed beautifully all week. I would, actually. I like to check my work when I get the chance. They walked together to the small shed behind the cottage where Hannah kept the wagon and her mare. Vincent inspected the wheel and axle with a critical eye, checking for any signs of wear or weakness, but everything looked solid. You have taken good care of it, he observed. I learned from the best. Hannah patted her mare's neck. This girl has been wonderful too. I think she appreciates having a stable and regular meals. Animals know when they are being treated well. Vincent stroked the mare's nose and she nickered softly. What is her name? Marigold. She was my father's horse, the only thing I brought with me from home that had any real value. Your father, is he? He died 5 years ago, cholera. My mother passed when I was young, so it was just the two of us for most of my life. That is part of why. She trailed off, not sure how much to reveal. Why Thomas Garrett's proposal meant so much to you, Vincent finished gently. You were alone and he offered you family. Hannah nodded, surprised by his understanding. Yes, I had no one and he promised me everything. I should have been more careful, or he should have been more honest. The fault was his, not yours. They left the shed and walked slowly back toward the cottage. The sun was getting low, painting the sky in those familiar shades of gold and rose. Hannah was very aware of Vincent walking beside her, the comfortable silence between them. Can I ask you something? Vincent said as they reached her door. Of course. That first day when I found you with the broken wagon, why were you really so resistant to accepting help? I do not think it was just pride. Hannah considered lying but found she did not want to. I was ashamed. Ashamed that I had failed to make it on my own. Ashamed that I needed rescuing. Ashamed of the whole situation that had driven me west in the first place. I felt like accepting help would be admitting all of that shame out loud. And now I am learning that maybe shame is less about what actually happened and more about how I let it define me. She looked up at him. You helped teach me that. You and your family. You showed me that needing help does not make someone weak or worthless. I am glad. Vincent's voice was warm. You deserve to be happy, Miss Harlow. You deserve to stop punishing yourself for someone else's failures. I am trying. It is harder than I thought it would be. Good things usually are. He settled his hat back on his head. I should get going. I told Marie I would stop by before heading home. But I will see you tomorrow after church. I will look forward to it. After he left, Hannah sat on her small porch and watched the stars emerge. She felt different somehow, lighter than she had in months. The shame that had weighed on her since that terrible day in Missouri seemed less oppressive, less defining. She was Hannah Harlow, schoolteacher, and that was enough. She did not need to be anything more. But even as she thought this, she could not deny that Vincent Quinn had something to do with this shift in perspective. There was something about his steady presence, his quiet wisdom, his refusal to judge her that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since before her father died. It was dangerous, she knew. She could not afford to depend on anyone, could not risk another betrayal. But perhaps, she thought, perhaps she could allow herself a friend. That would not be the same as trusting foolishly or losing her hard-won independence. She went to bed that night feeling something that might have been hope. And if her dreams featured blue-green eyes and a warm smile, she told herself it meant nothing at all. Sunday dawned clear and bright, and Hannah dressed carefully for church in her best dress, a simple but well-made garment of deep blue that brought out her eyes. She had washed her auburn hair the night before, and it fell in neat waves beneath her bonnet. The church service was pleasant, and Hannah found herself genuinely enjoying Reverend Thompson's sermon about forgiveness and new beginnings. It felt almost as if he were speaking directly to her, though she knew that was just coincidence. After the service, she lingered outside, chatting with some of the parents about their children's progress. She was deep in conversation with Mrs. Patterson about her son's difficulties with arithmetic when she became aware of Vincent approaching. He had cleaned up for church, wearing dark trousers and a clean white shirt under a vest, his hair still damp and neatly combed. He looked different from the dusty cowboy who had found her on the trail, more refined somehow, though no less appealing. "Miss Harlow, are you ready to head out?" he asked politely. "Yes, just let me get my things." Hannah excused herself from Mrs. Patterson and hurried to the cottage to collect the small basket of supplies she had put together as a gift for Margaret. The ride to the ranch was pleasant, with Vincent pointing out various landmarks and telling her stories about the area. Hannah found herself laughing at his tale of trying to catch a particularly ornery bull that had escaped from a neighbor's property, and she realized it had been a long time since she had laughed so freely. The Quinn family welcomed her warmly, with Margaret embracing her like an old friend, and the girls both talking at once about everything that had happened in the past week. Thomas greeted her with his usual booming friendliness, and Hannah found herself relaxing into the comfortable chaos of family life. They were joined at dinner by Marie and her husband Daniel, and Hannah instantly liked them both. Marie had her brother's eyes and her mother's warmth, and the obvious love between her and Daniel was touching to see. Daniel was a quiet, thoughtful man who seemed genuinely devoted to his wife and deeply committed to his work as the town's doctor. Over the meal, the conversation ranged over many topics. Hannah shared stories about her students, earning laughter with her description of trying to teach geography to children who had never been more than 20 miles from where they were born. Vincent and Thomas discussed ranch business, with Marie and Catherine offering their opinions freely. Louise peppered Hannah with questions about teaching, clearly still harboring dreams of doing something beyond ranch life. After dinner, the women sat in the parlor while the men went to check on a mare that was due to foal soon. Hannah found herself in easy conversation with the Quinn women, discussing everything from recipes to the latest fashions to the challenges of living in a remote area. "I am so glad Vincent brought you here," Marie said at one point. "We do not often meet women with similar interests and education. It is refreshing to have someone new to talk with." "I feel the same way," Hannah admitted. "I have been welcomed by the town, but there is a difference between being welcomed and actually forming friendships." "Then we shall be friends," Catherine declared. "And you must come visit often. You can even stay overnight sometimes if you want a break from town life." "I would like that very much," Margaret, who had been knitting quietly while listening to the conversation, spoke up. "Hannah, I hope you do not mind me saying, but you seem much more relaxed than when Vincent first brought you here. The worry lines around your eyes are not so pronounced." Hannah touched her face self-consciously. "Do I really look that different? You do. You look like you are finding your place here." Margaret's expression was kind. "I am glad. Everyone deserves to find where they belong." "I am starting to feel like Angel's Camp might be that place," Hannah said softly. "I have not felt settled anywhere since my father died. But here, with the school and the children, I feel like I am doing something worthwhile, like I matter." "You do matter," Louise said fiercely. "Those children are so lucky to have you. Half of them could barely read before you arrived, and now they are actually learning properly." "Louise is right," Marie agreed. "Daniel has commented on it several times. He says the change in the children's education is remarkable." The men returned from the barn, and Vincent immediately sought out Hannah with his eyes, smiling when he found her comfortably ensconced among his female relatives. "How is everyone doing in here? We are having a lovely time," Margaret said. "In fact, I was just thinking that it would be nice if Hannah could stay for supper as well. It is such a pleasure to have her here." "Oh, I do not want to impose," Hannah started, but Vincent cut her off. "It is not an imposition. We would all enjoy having you stay longer." "Unless you have somewhere else you need to be." Hannah realized she did not. She had no obligations, no one waiting for her. And the truth was, she did not want to leave. The Quinn home was warm and welcoming in a way that made her small cottage feel even lonelier by comparison. "Then I would be happy to stay," she said. "Thank you." The rest of the day passed in a warm blur of conversation and laughter. They played cards in the afternoon, with Louise and Hannah teaming up against Vincent and Catherine, while Marie and Daniel looked on and offered contradictory advice. Hannah found herself teasing Vincent about his strategy, and the easy banter between them felt natural and right. As evening approached and it came time for Hannah to return to town, she found herself reluctant to leave. The day had been one of the best she could remember in years, filled with the kind of simple joy she had thought was lost to her forever. Vincent hitched up her wagon and helped her climb onto the seat. "I enjoyed having you here today," he said as he handed her the reins. "I enjoyed being here. Your family is wonderful. They are pretty fond of you too." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "Hannah, I know you came west to be independent to build your own life, but I hope you know that being part of a community, having friends, does not take away from that. You can be strong and still let people care about you." Hannah looked down at him, at his honest face and earnest expression, and felt something shift in her chest. "I am beginning to understand that. Thank you, Vincent, for everything. You do not need to keep thanking me." "Friends help each other, remember? Friends," Hannah repeated, testing the word. It felt right. "Yes, we are friends." She thought she saw a flicker of something in his eyes, something that might have been disappointment, but it was gone too quickly for her to be sure. He stepped back and touched his hat in that familiar gesture. "Safe journey home. I will see you next week." Hannah drove back to Angel's Camp as the sun set, and she found herself thinking about Vincent's words, friends. It was a good word, a safe word. She could be friends with Vincent Quinn without risking her heart or her independence. But even as she told herself this, she knew she was lying. Because somewhere over the past 2 weeks, Vincent had become more than just a friend in her mind. She looked forward to seeing him with an intensity that had nothing to do with simple friendship. She noticed details about him, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the low timbre of his laugh, the gentleness of his hands. She caught herself thinking about him at odd moments during the day, wondering what he was doing, whether he was thinking about her too. It terrified her, this growing attachment. She had sworn she would not let herself be vulnerable again, would not trust anyone with her heart. But Vincent was nothing like Thomas. Thomas had been all charm and empty promises. Vincent was steady and real, his kindness genuine rather than performative. Thomas had made her feel like she needed to be more than she was. Vincent made her feel like exactly who she was enough. But that did not mean she should risk it, did it? She had a good life building here. She could not afford to jeopardize it for romantic feelings that might not even be reciprocated. Resolved to maintain a safe distance, Hannah threw herself even more deeply into her work over the following weeks. She expanded the curriculum, started a small library in the schoolhouse using donated books, and organized a spelling bee that had the whole town talking. She accepted invitations to Sunday dinner at various families' homes, building connections throughout the community, and she saw Vincent. He came to town every week, sometimes twice, and he always made a point of stopping by to see her. Sometimes they just talked for a few minutes on her porch. Sometimes he helped her with small tasks around the cottage, fixing a loose board or checking on Marigold. Once, he brought her a book his sister Marie thought she might enjoy. The conversations grew easier, more personal. Vincent told her about growing up on the ranch, about his dreams of expanding the cattle operation, about the challenges of making a living in California's changing economy. Hannah found herself sharing more about her past, about her father and the life they had built together, about the pain of losing him and finding herself alone. They never spoke directly about Thomas Garrett or the broken engagement, but Vincent seemed to understand the shape of her hurt without needing all the details. And Hannah found that his understanding, unlike the pity she had encountered back home, helped rather than hurt. October gave way to November, and the weather turned cooler. Hannah bought warmer clothes from the general store and invested in extra blankets for the cottage. The children at school grew more focused as they adjusted to the routine of regular education, and Hannah felt a deep satisfaction watching them progress. But beneath the surface contentment, she was aware of a growing restlessness. She caught herself watching the road for Vincent's arrival, her heart leaping when she spotted him riding into town. She found excuses to visit the general store on days she knew he might be there. She lay awake at night thinking about him, remembering conversations, analyzing every word and gesture for hidden meaning. She knew she was falling in love with him, and the knowledge filled her with equal parts joy and terror. It all came to a head on a cold Saturday in late November. Hannah had been invited to the ranch for the day to help Louise with some sewing projects. When Vincent offered to escort her there and back, she accepted, telling herself it was just practical. They rode together in her wagon, with Vincent's horse tied to the back, and the conversation was easy and comfortable as always. But Hannah was acutely aware of his presence beside her, of the warmth of his leg nearly touching hers on the narrow seat, of the way his voice seemed to resonate in her chest. When they arrived at the ranch, Louise monopolized Hannah immediately, pulling her inside to show her the dress pattern she wanted to attempt. But after a few hours of sewing and chatting, Louise had to help her mother with some household task, leaving Hannah briefly alone in the parlor. She was examining the books on the family's small shelf when Vincent came in from outside, bringing with him the smell of cold air and horses. "Finding anything interesting?" he asked, walking over to join her. "Your family has good taste in books. I see you have some Dickens and even some Emerson. Marie is the reader in the family. She keeps trying to educate the rest of us." He reached past her to pull out a volume, and his arm brushed against hers, sending a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. They were standing very close now, close enough that Hannah could see the gold flecks in his blue-green eyes, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. She knew she should step back, should put some distance between them, but she seemed frozen in place. "Hannah," Vincent said softly, and the way he said her name, the tenderness in his voice, made her breath catch. "Yes. I need to tell you something, and I am afraid it might change things between us, but I cannot keep it to myself anymore." Hannah's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must hear it. "What is it?" "I have feelings for you, more than friendship feelings. I have tried to respect your need for independence, tried not to push, but I cannot pretend anymore. I care about you, Hannah, deeply." The words hung in the air between them, and Hannah felt the world tilt on its axis. This was what she had been hoping for and fearing in equal measure. Vincent's feelings matched her own, which meant she had a choice to make. She could retreat back into her safe isolation, or she could take a risk on something real. "Vincent, She faltered, unsure what to say. "You do not have to say anything right now," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know. Whatever you decide, we can still be friends if that is what you want. I will not pressure you or make things awkward. It is not that simple." Hannah's voice was barely above a whisper. "I have feelings for you too, but I am terrified of trusting again, of being hurt again. What happened with Thomas, it broke something in me. I do not know if I can risk that kind of pain. I am not Thomas." Vincent's voice was firm but gentle. "I do not care about your family connections or your social standing. I care about you, the person I have gotten to know over these past months. Your strength, your dedication to your students, the way you fight so hard to be independent even when it is difficult. That is who I see when I look at you. But what if you change your mind? What if you decide I am not enough, just like he did? Then I would be the greatest fool who ever lived." Vincent reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "Hannah, I cannot promise that life will always be easy. But I can promise that I see you for who you really are, and I value that person more than I can say. You do not have to decide anything right now. I just wanted you to know that you have a choice. You can keep yourself safe behind your walls, or you can take a chance on something that might be wonderful." Hannah looked down at their joined hands, at the way his rough, work-worn fingers held hers so carefully. She thought about the past months, about all the ways Vincent had shown her through actions, not just words, that he was trustworthy. He had never made her feel less than, never questioned her abilities, never tried to control or diminish her. He had supported her independence even while offering friendship and help. "I am so scared," she admitted. "I know. That is all right. We can take this slowly. There is no rush. What would this even look like? I have my position at the school. I need to maintain my reputation in the community. We court properly. I call on you. We spend time together openly. We let people see that we are building something. When we are both ready, if we are both ready, we talk about a future." Vincent squeezed her hand gently. "But only if that is what you want." Hannah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision before her. She could play it safe, keep Vincent at arm's length and maintain her careful independence. Or she could take the biggest risk of all and let herself be vulnerable again. She thought about her father, about the advice he had given her when she was young. "Courage is not the absence of fear, Hannah. It is doing the right thing even when you are afraid." Was this the right thing? She looked up into Vincent's eyes and saw patience, understanding, and something deeper that made her heart ache with longing. He was not Thomas. He had proven that over and over. Maybe it was time to stop letting her past define her future. "All right," she said softly. "Yes, I would like to try. To court properly and see where this goes." The smile that broke across Vincent's face was brilliant, transforming his features. "Yeah, yes, but slowly like you said, And if at any point I need to step back, you have to respect that. Absolutely. Whatever pace you need, that is what we will do. They stood there smiling at each other like fools until Louise's voice called from the kitchen, breaking the spell. Vincent released Hannah's hand reluctantly, and they moved apart just before Louise came back into the room. If Louise noticed the charged atmosphere or the glow on both their faces, she was polite enough not to comment. But when Hannah caught Margaret's eye later, she saw understanding and approval there, and she knew that Vincent's mother had already guessed what had transpired. The ride back to Angel's camp that evening was different from any of their previous journeys. There was a new awareness between them, a delicious tension that came from acknowledged feelings. Vincent's hand brushed hers as he helped her down from the wagon, and the touch sent electricity through her. "Can I call on you properly tomorrow?" he asked. "After church, perhaps we could take a walk if the weather holds. I would like that very much. Then it is a date." He grinned at her, and Hannah found herself grinning back, feeling lighter than she had in years. That night, lying in her bed, Hannah let herself imagine a future that included Vincent. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She was taking a risk, opening herself up to potential hurt. But she was also opening herself up to potential joy, and maybe, just maybe, that was worth the fear. The next morning, Hannah dressed with extra care, choosing a dress in warm amber that complemented her coloring. She attended church service, aware of Vincent sitting with his family several pews away, equally aware of his eyes on her throughout the sermon. After the service, he approached with that slightly shy smile she was coming to adore. "Still up for that walk?" "Absolutely." They walked through the town and out along one of the trails that led into the hills. It was a beautiful day, crisp and clear, with the kind of bright sunshine that made everything seem more vivid. They talked about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing easily as it always did between them. Eventually, they reached a spot that overlooked the valley, with a view of the town below and the mountains rising in the distance. Vincent led Hannah to a large rock that made a natural bench, and they sat together looking out over the landscape. "I love this view," Vincent said. "I come up here sometimes when I need to think. It reminds me how big the world is, how much possibility there is. It is beautiful." Hannah leaned back, tilting her face up to catch the sun. "I can see why you love it here. Does that mean you are starting to love it too?" "I think I might be." She glanced at him. "This place, these people, they are becoming home in a way I did not expect. I am glad." Vincent shifted slightly closer. "Hannah, I want you to know that I meant what I said yesterday. I care about you, and I am willing to wait as long as you need to feel secure in this. There is no timeline, no pressure. I know, and I appreciate that more than I can say." Hannah took a breath. "But I also want you to know that I am committed to trying this, to seeing where it goes. I am scared, yes, but I am also hopeful, and I have not felt hopeful in a very long time. That is all I can ask for." They sat in companionable silence for a while, and then Vincent reached over and took her hand again. This time, Hannah did not hesitate. She laced her fingers through his and held on, letting herself enjoy the simple pleasure of human connection. Over the following weeks, they settled into a pattern of courtship that felt both traditional and uniquely theirs. Vincent called on Hannah at least twice a week, sometimes more. They took walks, attended church services together, and spent time with his family at the ranch. He helped her with projects at the schoolhouse, and she helped his sisters with various tasks at the ranch. The town took notice, of course. Angel's camp was small enough that any courtship was a matter of public interest, but the reactions were largely positive. Vincent was well-liked and respected, and Hannah had proven herself as an excellent teacher. People seemed pleased to see them together. There were a few whispers, mostly from older women who thought it improper for a schoolteacher to be courting. But Reverend Thompson put those concerns to rest by publicly stating that he saw nothing wrong with Miss Harlow building a personal life while maintaining her professional responsibilities. As December arrived and Christmas approached, Hannah found herself genuinely happy for the first time since before her father's death. The fear was still there, lurking in quiet moments, but it was increasingly overshadowed by joy. Vincent made her laugh, supported her dreams, and treated her with a respect and affection that felt revolutionary after Thomas's conditional love. They had their first real disagreement on a cold afternoon in mid-December. Hannah had stayed late at the schoolhouse, preparing for the Christmas program she was organizing with the children. Vincent arrived to walk her home and found her still working, looking exhausted. "Hannah, you are pushing yourself too hard," he said with concern. "You have been working every evening this week. You need to rest." "I am fine. The program is only a week away and there is still so much to do." "The program will be fine. You have already done more than enough, but you will not be fine if you collapse from exhaustion." "I know my own limits, Vincent." There was a sharp edge to Hannah's voice, born of tiredness and stress. "Do you? Because from where I am standing, it looks like you are trying to prove something that does not need proving. Everyone already knows you are an excellent teacher. You do not have to work yourself to death to earn their approval." His words hit too close to a truth Hannah did not want to examine. "You do not understand. I need this program to be perfect. I need to show them that hiring me was the right decision. They already know that. What you need is to take care of yourself." Vincent's voice was firm but gentle. "Please, Hannah, let me help you finish up here and then go home and rest. You are not serving anyone by running yourself into the ground." Hannah wanted to argue, to insist that she was fine, that she could handle it. But looking at Vincent's concerned face, she realized he was right. She was pushing herself too hard, driven by the old fear that she was not enough, that she had to constantly prove her worth. "All right," she said quietly. "You are right. I am tired." "Good, that is settled then. Let me help you clean up here." They worked together to put the schoolhouse in order, and then Vincent walked her home through the cold evening. At her door, he paused. "I am sorry if I overstepped," he said. "I did not mean to tell you what to do." "You did not overstep. You were looking out for me, and I needed someone to do that. I have spent so long trying to be completely self-sufficient that I forget it is okay to let someone care about me." Hannah reached up and touched his face gently. "Thank you for caring enough to push back when I need it, always." Vincent turned his head to press a kiss to her palm, and Hannah felt warmth spread through her entire body. They had not yet kissed properly, though the tension and desire between them grew stronger every day. Hannah appreciated Vincent's restraint, his willingness to let her set the pace. But in that moment, standing in the cold with his lips against her palm, she found herself wanting more. "Vincent," she said softly. He looked at her, and whatever he saw in her face made his eyes darken. "Yes. Would you? Could you kiss me, a real kiss? Are you sure?" "I am sure." Vincent cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle and reverent. He lowered his head slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, and then his lips met hers in a kiss that was everything a first kiss should be. Sweet and tender and full of promise, it made Hannah's knees weak and her heart race. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks." "I have wanted you to do it too," Hannah admitted. "I was just scared." "Are you still scared?" Hannah thought about it honestly. "A little, but not of you, not anymore, just of how much you have come to mean to me, how much it would hurt if I lost you." "You are not going to lose me," Vincent said firmly. "I am not going anywhere, Hannah, I promise you that." She wanted to believe him. And standing there in his arms, feeling the solid warmth of him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, she found that she did believe him. Vincent Quinn was a man of his word, and he had given her his word. The Christmas program was a huge success, with every child performing beautifully and the whole town turning out to watch. Hannah felt a deep sense of accomplishment as the parents thanked her afterwards, praising both the quality of the program and the improvement in their children's education. Vincent was there, of course, sitting with his family and beaming with pride. After the program ended, he approached with a small wrapped package. "This is for you," he said. "Merry Christmas." "Vincent, you did not need to get me anything." But Hannah was touched as she accepted the gift. "I wanted to. Go ahead, open it." Hannah carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a beautiful leather-bound journal. The leather was soft and supple, the pages thick and creamy. On the cover, her initials had been tooled in an elegant script. "Vincent, this is beautiful," she breathed. "I thought you could use it to write down your thoughts or lesson plans or whatever you want. I know you are always scribbling notes on scraps of paper. Now you will have something proper to write in. I love it. Thank you so much." Hannah clutched the journal to her chest, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "There is one more thing." Vincent pulled out a small envelope. "It is from my whole family, actually. They wanted me to give it to you." Hannah opened the envelope to find a letter inviting her to spend Christmas Day at the ranch with the Quinn family. Tears pricked at her eyes as she read the warm, affectionate words. "Hannah, are you all right?" Vincent looked concerned. "I am more than all right. I am just. I had not realized how much I missed having a family. Your family has been so kind to me, welcoming me as if I truly belong. It means everything. You do belong." Vincent took her hand. With me. You belong, Hannah." Christmas Day at the Quinn Ranch was magical. The house was decorated with greenery and candles, and the smell of roasting turkey and fresh bread filled the air. Marie and Daniel were there, along with their infant son, and the house rang with laughter and conversation. Hannah helped in the kitchen, exchanging recipes and stories with Margaret and the girls. She played with the baby, feeling an unexpected tug of longing as she held the warm, solid weight of him. She sat at the dinner table surrounded by the Quinn family and felt like she had finally come home. After dinner, Vincent pulled her aside. "Can we talk privately for a moment?" "Of course." He led her out to the porch, where the cold air was bracing after the warmth of the house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors. "I have been thinking about something," Vincent said, taking both her hands in his. "And I need to know if you have been thinking about it too." "What is it?" "A future. Together. I know we have only been courting for about a month, but I have known for a lot longer than that how I feel about you. I love you, Hannah. I want to build a life with you if that is something you want too." Hannah's heart was thundering in her chest. Are you proposing?" "Not officially. Not yet. I wanted to know if you are even open to the idea before I make it formal." Vincent's eyes searched her face. "I do not want to pressure you, but I also do not want to hide what I want. I want to marry you, Hannah. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to support your teaching and build a family with you and grow old together. But only if that is what you want too." Hannah felt tears streaming down her face, but they were good tears, joyful tears. 3 months ago, she had been alone on a road with a broken wagon, ashamed and afraid to ask for help. Now she stood on a porch with a man who loved her, not despite her past but simply because of who she was, and he was offering her everything she had ever wanted. "Yes," she said through her tears. "Yes, Vincent, I want that too, all of it. I love you." The joy on Vincent's face was brilliant. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply while the sun set behind them in a blaze of glory. When they finally broke apart, Both laughing and crying at the same time, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I will do this properly," he promised. "I will talk to Reverend Thompson, make it official. But I needed you to know, needed to hear you say it. I am saying it. Yes to a future with you. Yes to building a life together. Yes to everything." They went back inside hand in hand, and the knowing looks on his family's faces made it clear that everyone had guessed what had transpired. Margaret hugged Hannah tightly, whispering that she was gaining the daughter she had always wanted. Thomas clapped Vincent on the back with hearty congratulations. The girls squealed with excitement, already planning the wedding. 3 days later, Vincent made it official. He came to the cottage with flowers and a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, a simple gold band with a small but beautiful sapphire. He got down on one knee in her small parlor and asked her properly to be his wife. Hannah said yes again, and when he slipped the ring onto her finger, she felt the last of her shame and fear fall away. She was not the broken woman who had fled Missouri in disgrace. She was Hannah Harlow, beloved teacher, and soon to be wife to a good man who valued her for exactly who she was. They married in late February, after Hannah completed her first full school year. The wedding was held in the church, with the whole town attending. Hannah wore a simple but beautiful dress that Catherine had helped her make, and she carried wildflowers that Louise had gathered. Marie stood as her matron of honor, and Vincent's brother Benjamin, who had been away on business during Hannah's initial arrival, served as his best man. As Hannah walked down the aisle toward Vincent, seeing the love and pride in his eyes, she thought about that day on the road when he had stopped to help her. He had told her that pride would not keep her warm that night, and he had been right. But more than that, he had shown her that accepting help was not weakness, that vulnerability could be a kind of strength, and that sometimes the best things in life come when we let down our walls and let people in. They moved into a larger house on the edge of town after the wedding, a place with room for a family. Hannah continued teaching, with the school committee's blessing, and Vincent expanded his role at the ranch while also helping Hannah with various projects around their home. Their first child, a son they named Samuel after Reverend Thompson, arrived the following winter. Hannah had been terrified of childbirth, of something going wrong, but Vincent was there through all of it, steady and supportive. When she finally held their baby in her arms, with Vincent beside her looking awed and overwhelmed, she felt a completeness she had never known before. They had 3 more children over the following years, a daughter named Rose, then twin boys they called James and Joseph. Their house was always full of noise and laughter, and Hannah often thought about how different her life had turned out from what she had expected. She continued teaching until the twins were born, then took a few years away to focus on her young family. But she eventually returned to the schoolhouse, with Margaret and the girls happily helping to watch the children. Hannah discovered that she could be both a devoted mother and a dedicated teacher, that the two roles complemented rather than conflicted with each other. Vincent's ranch continued to prosper, and he became known throughout the region as a fair and skilled cattleman. But he never let the work consume him the way some men did. He always made time for his family, always showed up for the children's important moments, always made Hannah feel valued and loved. There were hard times, of course. Years when the cattle prices dropped and money was tight. Illnesses that kept them up nights worrying. Disagreements and frustrations that come with any long marriage. But they faced everything together, with the same teamwork they had shown from the beginning. Hannah never heard from Thomas Garrett again, though she learned through a letter from an old acquaintance that he had eventually married a woman from an even wealthier family and lived a life of social obligation and quiet misery. Hannah felt no satisfaction in this news, only a distant pity for the man who had been too weak to follow his own heart. She never regretted her journey west, never wished she had stayed in Missouri. Angel's Camp had become her true home, and the Quinn family, both the one she married into and the one she created with Vincent, were her real family. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Hannah back to the spot where they had shared their first real conversation about a future together, the overlook with the view of the valley. They sat together on the same rock, older now, with the weathering that came from a decade of hard work and child-rearing, but deeply content. "You remember that first day?" Vincent asked, his arm around her shoulders. "When I found you with the broken wagon, how could I forget? I was so stubborn, so determined to refuse help even though I desperately needed it. I am glad I did not listen to your protests. So am I." Hannah leaned into him. "You changed my life that day, Vincent. You showed me that I did not have to carry everything alone, that accepting help and building connections did not make me weak. You changed mine too. You reminded me what courage really looks like. It is not about never being afraid. It is about doing the right thing even when you are terrified." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun make its descent toward the western hills. Below them, Angel's Camp spread out in the valley, smoke rising from chimneys, the sounds of life drifting up on the breeze. Hannah could see their house from here, could imagine their children playing in the yard under Margaret's watchful eye. "I have been thinking," Vincent said, "about expanding the ranch, maybe buying that property to the east. What do you think?" "I think it is a good investment if we can afford it. But you should also factor in that Rose will be starting school next year and James and Joseph the year after. We will have more expenses." "True. Maybe we should wait another year or two, build up the savings." Vincent kissed the top of her head. "See, this is why I married you. You keep me grounded." "Someone has to." Hannah smiled up at him. "Though I seem to remember you being the one who kept me grounded when we first met. I was so busy trying to prove I did not need anyone that I nearly destroyed myself in the process. We balance each other out. That is what makes us work. That and the fact that you are stubborn enough to push past my defenses. Pride will not keep you warm at night, remember." Hannah laughed. "I do remember, and you were absolutely right. Pride would have left me alone and miserable, but you gave me something so much better." "What is that?" "Love, family, home, everything I was too proud and too scared to ask for." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together in the familiar gesture that still made her heart warm. "Thank you for seeing past my fear and shame that day. Thank you for offering help even when I tried to refuse it. Thank you for being patient while I learned to trust again." "Thank you for taking the risk," Vincent replied. "For choosing to be vulnerable even though you were terrified. For building this life with me." As the sun set in a blaze of color, painting the valley in gold and rose and purple, they sat together and watched. Two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, when one needed help and the other had the courage to offer it. Hannah thought about the woman she had been, alone on a dusty road with a broken wagon and too much pride. She bore no resemblance to that frightened, ashamed person anymore. She was Hannah Quinn now, wife and mother and teacher, a woman who had learned that strength came not from refusing help but from knowing when to accept it, that true independence meant having the freedom to choose connection rather than isolation. She was loved and valued for exactly who she was, and she woke up every day grateful for the cowboy who had stopped to help her that September afternoon and changed the course of her life forever. Years continued to pass in the way they do, marked by seasons and harvests, by children growing and family expanding. Samuel, their eldest, grew into a thoughtful boy who loved books as much as his mother, and developed a keen mind for numbers that would eventually lead him to become a banker. Rose inherited her father's practical nature and her mother's teaching instinct, often helping her younger brothers with their lessons and showing a maturity beyond her years. The twins, James and Joseph, were inseparable and full of mischief, keeping everyone on their toes with their adventures and schemes. Hannah watched her children grow with a mixture of pride and wistfulness. She remembered holding each of them as infants, marveling at the miracle of their existence. And now, they were becoming their own people with distinct personalities and dreams. Vincent was a wonderful father, patient and playful, teaching the boys to ride and rope while also making sure Rose knew she was just as capable as her brothers at anything she set her mind to. The ranch continued to thrive under Vincent and Thomas's management. Benjamin, Vincent's brother who had returned to help with operations, married a woman from Sacramento and built a house on the property. Catherine eventually married as well to a schoolteacher from a neighboring town who had been patient enough to wait for her and sincere enough to win her heart. Louise became a seamstress, opening a small shop in Angel's Camp that quickly became popular throughout the region. Marie and Daniel had 3 more children after their first son, and the cousins all grew up together, spending weekends and holidays at the ranch running wild through the hills. Margaret and Thomas aged gracefully, becoming beloved grandparents who spoiled the children and dispensed wisdom with equal measure. Hannah's teaching career continued to flourish. She became known throughout the region as an exceptional educator, and several of her students went on to attend university, a rarity for a small mining town. She took particular joy in encouraging young girls to pursue education, remembering her own struggles and wanting to open doors for the next generation. On a warm spring afternoon when Hannah was 41 years old, she sat on her porch watching Rose, now 15, teach the twins a new card game. Samuel, 17, was off at the ranch helping Vincent with the spring cattle drive. The scene was so peaceful, so ordinary, and yet it filled Hannah with profound gratitude. Rose looked up and caught her mother watching. "Mother, are you all right?" "I am perfect, darling." Just appreciating this moment, Rose smiled, that knowing smile that reminded Hannah so much of her grandmother Margaret. You get that look sometimes, like you are seeing something the rest of us cannot. I suppose I am, in a way. I see all the possibilities that almost did not happen, all the blessings that came from a single choice made one September afternoon long ago. The twins, now 10 years old, looked up with interest. James, always the more curious of the two, asked, "What choice, Mother?" Hannah hesitated, then decided they were old enough to hear the story. "When I first came to Angel's Camp, I was traveling alone with a wagon. The wheel broke, and I was stranded on the road. Your father came along and offered to help me, but I was too proud and too ashamed to accept at first." "Why were you ashamed?" Joseph asked with the bluntness of childhood. "Because I thought needing help meant I was weak or a failure. I had been hurt by someone before your father, someone who made me feel like I was not good enough, and I was trying so hard to prove that I could do everything by myself." "But Father helped you anyway," Rose said, already knowing this part of the story. "He did. He saw past my pride and my fear, and he said something that changed everything. He said, 'Pride will not keep you warm tonight,' and he was right. If I had clung to my pride, if I had refused his help, I would have lost so much. I would not have found this town or my teaching position, and most importantly, I would not have found your father and the life we built together." "So you are saying we only exist because grandmother's wagon wheel broke?" James asked with 10-year-old logic. Hannah laughed. "In a way, yes. But more than that, you exist because I learned to accept help when I needed it, and because your father was kind enough to offer it without judgment. Rose stood and came to sit beside her mother on the porch steps. That is a good story, Mother. You think you will ever write it down? Perhaps I will someday. Hannah put her arm around her daughter. I want you all to remember that there is no shame in needing help, in being vulnerable, in admitting you cannot do everything alone. True strength is knowing when to ask for support and having the courage to accept it when it is offered. The sound of horses approaching drew their attention, and they looked up to see Vincent and Samuel riding in from the ranch. Vincent sat tall in the saddle, his hair now touched with gray at the temples, lines around his eyes from years in the sun. Samuel rode beside him with the easy confidence of a young man comfortable in his own skin. They dismounted, and Vincent walked over to the porch, dropping a kiss on Hannah's head before greeting the other children. What are you all discussing so seriously? Mother was telling us about how you met, Rose explained. Ah, the broken wagon story. That is a good one. Vincent settled onto the porch beside Hannah, and Samuel joined his siblings on the steps. It is more than just a good story, Hannah said. It is a reminder of what matters. Family, community, connection. Those are the things that keep us warm when the nights are cold. Vincent took her hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after so many years together. Wise words from a wise woman. I learned from the best, Hannah replied, looking at him with all the love she still felt after so many years together. That evening, after the children were in bed, Hannah and Vincent sat together on the porch as they often did, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. These quiet moments together had become sacred over the years, a time to reconnect after busy days, to share thoughts and dreams, to simply be together. Have you been happy? Vincent asked suddenly. Truly happy, I mean, not just content but genuinely fulfilled with the life we built. Hannah turned to look at him, surprised by the question. Where is this coming from? I was thinking about what you told the children today, about the choice you made to accept help. I started wondering if you ever regretted it, if you ever wished you had stayed independent, pursued a different path. Never, Hannah said firmly. Not for a single moment. Vincent, you gave me everything I did not even know I wanted. You showed me that independence and connection are not opposing forces, that I could be a strong, capable woman and still have a partner who supports and cherishes me. You never tried to diminish me or control me. You celebrated my strengths and supported my dreams while building dreams of our own together. I am glad, because you gave me everything too. A home, a family, a partner who challenges me to be better. You brought light and purpose into my life in ways I never expected. We rescued each other, I think, Hannah said softly. You rescued me from isolation and shame I rescued you from. What? Vincent considered the question. From settling. From accepting a life that was good enough but not great. You made me want more, want to build something extraordinary. And we did together. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Hannah said, I have been thinking about something. Rose wants to become a teacher, did you know that? I suspected as much. She has your gift for it. She asked me if she should attend the normal school in Sacramento, or if she should just learn from me here and take over the Angels Camp School eventually. What did you tell her? I told her she should go to Sacramento, get the formal education and the broader experience. She can always come back here if she wants to, but she should see more of the world first, have choices. That is good advice, Vincent agreed, though I will miss her when she goes. So will I. But I want her to have opportunities I never had, to make choices from a place of possibility rather than desperation. She will have that. All our children will. That is what we have built for them, a foundation strong enough that they can pursue their dreams without fear. Speaking of dreams, Hannah said, I have been thinking about expanding the school, maybe adding a second teacher to handle the older students while I focus on the younger ones. The town is growing, and one teacher is not enough anymore. That is a wonderful idea. Have you discussed it with Reverend Thompson? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first, make sure you think it is feasible. It would mean less income for our family, since the salary would be split between two teachers. Vincent shook his head. Hannah, we are more than comfortable financially. The ranch does well, and we have savings. If this is what you think is best for the students, then you should pursue it. I support you completely. This was Vincent, always supporting her dreams, always putting their family's well-being and her fulfillment ahead of simple financial calculations. Hannah leaned over and kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. I love you, she said when they finally broke apart. After all these years, I love you more than ever. The feeling is entirely mutual, Vincent replied with a smile. Time marched forward in its inexorable way. Samuel left for university in San Francisco, returning home during breaks full of new ideas and perspectives. Rose attended the normal school in Sacramento, as planned, excelling in her studies and making her parents proud. The twins grew into tall, strong young men who helped Vincent manage the ever-expanding ranch operations. Hannah did expand the school, bringing on a young teacher named Elizabeth Porter to handle the older students. The two women worked together beautifully, and the quality of education in Angel's Camp became something the town took great pride in. Margaret and Thomas both passed peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, having lived long, full lives surrounded by family. Their loss was deeply felt, but there was comfort in knowing they had seen their children and grandchildren flourish, had witnessed the strong community they had helped build. Hannah was 52 years old when she received an unexpected letter from Missouri. It was from a woman she had known slightly in her youth, informing her that Thomas Garrett had died suddenly of a heart condition, leaving behind a widow and no children. The letter writer seemed to think Hannah would want to know, perhaps assuming she still carried a torch for her former fiancé. Hannah sat on her porch reading the letter, trying to summon some feeling about Thomas's death, but finding only a distant sadness for a life that had apparently been less fulfilling than it might have been. She thought about the woman she had been when she loved Thomas, so young and naive, so desperate for belonging that she had been willing to overlook every red flag. Vincent found her there, the letter in her lap, staring out at the hills. Everything all right. Thomas Garrett died. Someone thought I should know. Vincent sat beside her, reading the letter over her shoulder. I am sorry. Even though he hurt you, death is always sad. Do you know what struck me most about this news? How little I feel about it. He was such a huge part of my life once, and now he is just a distant memory of someone I used to know. The woman who loved him might as well be a stranger to me now. That is because you have lived a full life since then. You have loved and been loved. You have raised children and built a career and made a difference in your community. Thomas Garrett is just a footnote in your story, not the main chapter. Hannah turned to look at her husband, this man who had seen her at her worst and loved her anyway, who had supported her dreams and built a life with her that exceeded anything she had imagined possible. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For stopping that day on the road. For seeing past my pride and my fear. For being patient while I learned to trust. For every day since then that you have chosen to love me. Loving you has never been a choice, Hannah. It is as natural as breathing. You are part of me, woven into everything I am. They burned the letter together in the fireplace that evening, watching Thomas Garrett's name turn to ash and smoke. It felt like closing a door on the past, finally and completely. Hannah had no regrets, no what-ifs. She had the life she was meant to live, with the man she was meant to love. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. Samuel married a woman he met at university and settled in San Francisco, becoming a successful banker as Hannah had predicted. Rose returned to Angel's Camp after completing her education and took over the older students at the school, working alongside her mother in what became a beloved partnership. The twins both married local girls and settled on different sections of the ranch, expanding operations and ensuring the Quinn legacy would continue. Hannah became a grandmother, delighting in her grandchildren the way her in-laws had delighted in her children. She watched Samuel's sophisticated city children and Rose's studious brood and the twins' wild ranch kids all play together during family gatherings, and felt the deep satisfaction of seeing her family grow and thrive. Vincent's hair turned completely silver, and Hannah's auburn locks faded to a distinguished gray. They both moved a bit slower, with the aches and pains that come with age and hard work, but their love remained as strong as ever. They still sat on the porch together every evening, still held hands and talked about everything and nothing, still found comfort and joy in each other's presence. When Hannah was 65, she decided it was time to retire from teaching. Her body was telling her it was time to slow down, and Rose was more than capable of running the school. On her last day, the entire town turned out to honor her 37 years of service. Student after student stood up to share how she had changed their lives, how she had believed in them when no one else did, how she had opened doors they did not know existed. Hannah stood before the assembled crowd, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and gratitude. "Thank you all," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Teaching has been one of the great privileges of my life, but I want you to know that you have taught me just as much as I taught you. You taught me about resilience and hope and the boundless potential that exists in every human being. You reminded me every day why community matters, why education matters, why investing in the next generation is the most important work we can do." Vincent stood at the back of the room, watching his wife with pride and love shining in his eyes. When the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, he came to her side and took her hand. "Ready to start your retirement?" he asked. "Ready to start our retirement, you mean? I heard you talking with Benjamin about turning over more of the ranch operations to the boys." "You hear everything," Vincent said with a smile. "I do. And I think it is a wonderful idea. We have worked hard all our lives. We have earned the right to slow down a bit, to enjoy the time we have left together." They spent the next several years doing exactly that. They traveled a bit, visiting Samuel in San Francisco and taking trips to see parts of California they had never explored. They spent long, lazy days at the ranch, playing with grandchildren and working in Hannah's expansive garden. They attended church every Sunday and participated in community events, but without the press of constant responsibilities. It was a golden time, peaceful and fulfilling. They knew they were blessed, knew that not everyone got to grow old together with their health intact and their family thriving. They treasured every moment. On a warm evening in late summer, when Hannah was 73 years old, she and Vincent sat on their porch watching yet another sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. They had been married for 46 years, and she still felt a flutter in her chest when he took her hand. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Hannah asked. "When you found me with the broken wagon." "Which part?" "I said a lot of things that day." "The important part." "Pride will not keep you warm tonight." Those words changed my life. Vincent was quiet for a moment, remembering. "I just spoke the truth as I saw it. You were freezing yourself out with your pride, and I could not stand to see it. You saw me when I could not see myself." You saw past the shame and the fear to the person I could become if I just let down my walls." Hannah squeezed his hand. "I was so lost that day, so convinced that independence meant isolation. You showed me a better way. We showed each other. You taught me about courage and resilience. You showed me what it means to rebuild your life from ashes and create something beautiful." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, and the stars began to emerge, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and built a life of meaning and love. Hannah thought about the broken wagon wheel that had seemed like such a disaster at the time, and how it had turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to her. She thought about pride and shame and fear, and how she had let those emotions nearly rob her of everything good. She thought about the courage it had taken to accept help, to trust again, to open her heart after it had been broken. And she thought about Vincent, steady and true, who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Vincent asked, though she thought he knew, for everything. For that first day and every day since, for our life together, for our family, for showing me that pride could not keep me warm, but love could. Vincent raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "The pleasure has been entirely mine, Mrs. Quinn, the very greatest pleasure of my life." They sat together under the stars, hands clasped, hearts entwined, two souls who had found home in each other. And if the night grew cold around them, they did not notice, warmed as they were by a love that had started with a broken wagon wheel and a cowboy's kindness, and had grown into something that would outlast them both, living on in the family and the community they had built together. Years later, when both Hannah and Vincent had passed peacefully into whatever comes next, their children gathered to go through their parents' belongings. Among Hannah's things, they found the leather journal Vincent had given her that first Christmas, filled with her neat handwriting. It was part memoir, part love letter, chronicling their life together from that first meeting on a dusty road to their final years. On the last page, written in Hannah's slightly shaky hand from her final year, were these words: "If I could go back to that scared, ashamed young woman standing beside a broken wagon, I would tell her this: accept the help, take the risk, let down your walls. The cowboy who stops will see your worth even when you cannot. He will love you fiercely and faithfully for the rest of your days. And together, you will build something more beautiful than anything you could create alone. Pride will not keep you warm, but love will. Love will keep you warm through every cold night, every hard season, every challenge life brings. Trust the cowboy, trust yourself, trust love. It will not fail you." Rose read these words aloud to her siblings and their families, gathered in the house where their parents had lived for so many years. There were tears and laughter and shared memories, each person contributing their piece of the story, painting a picture of two people who had loved each other well and lived their lives with purpose and joy. And in Angel's Camp, where Hannah had taught for nearly 4 decades, and where the Quinn family had been prominent members of the community for generations, the story of the broken wagon and the cowboy who stopped to help became legend. It was told to children as an example of kindness, to young lovers as a model of true partnership, to anyone facing hard times as a reminder that help often comes when we least expect it, if we are brave enough to accept it. The schoolhouse where Hannah had taught still stood, now named the Hannah Quinn School in her honor. The ranch where Vincent had lived and worked prospered under his grandson's management. And every September, when the leaves began to turn and the air grew crisp, the Quinn descendants would gather to celebrate the anniversary of that day on a dusty road when a broken wagon wheel changed everything. They would raise glasses and tell stories and remember two people who had loved each other with extraordinary devotion. They would speak of pride and shame and courage and redemption. And they would repeat the words that had become a family motto passed down through generations. Pride will not keep you warm, but love will. Love will always be enough. And in that, as in so many things, Vincent and Hannah Quinn were absolutely right. Love was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.